In Westeros, apologies are rarely spoken out loud. Men kneel for crowns. Knights swear oaths. Kings declare judgment. But very few fathers ever say the words, "I was wrong." And that's why this scene hurts. Not because someone dies. Not because swords clash. But because no one says what they feel, and yet everything is understood. Egg stands in that room with a storm inside him. For years, he has watched what his family has become. Pride. Violence. Madness wrapped in royal blood. Aerion represents all of it. Cruelty without consequence. Arrogance without remorse. And as Aerion sleeps, defenseless, Egg stares at him not just as a brother, but as a symbol of everything he wants to escape. This isn't simple anger. It's exhaustion. Exhaustion from living inside a dynasty that mistakes brutality for strength. Exhaustion from watching men destroy each other and call it honor. Exhaustion from being young and powerless in a house where power defines worth. In that moment, violence feels like clarity. One act. One decision. One clean break from the chaos. For a second, Egg believes that if he removes the problem, he might finally breathe. But before he acts, he notices something that stops him colder than fear ever could. His father is already there. Maekar isn't shouting. He isn't commanding guards. He isn't reaching for a weapon. He's just standing there, silent, as if he has been waiting. And that silence changes everything. Because Maekar knows what that look in Egg's eyes means. He has seen it before. He has felt it before. Rage that feels righteous. Anger that feels justified. The belief that one decisive blow can fix what grief has broken. Maekar once acted on that belief. When Baelor fell, it wasn't just a prince who died. It was a brother. And even if the strike was not meant to kill, the result does not change. Maekar carries that weight every single day. In a world that celebrates warriors, he lives with the memory of becoming the thing he never meant to be. That's why he doesn't rush toward Egg like a king defending order. He approaches him like a man recognizing himself. When Maekar places his hands on Egg's shoulders, it doesn't feel like authority. There is no force behind it. No command. His grip is firm, but not controlling. It's steady, almost careful. It's the kind of touch that says, "Stop. Not because I forbid you, but because I know where this road leads." This is where the scene becomes something deeper than a father preventing a mistake. It becomes a confession without language. Maekar cannot speak about Baelor the way he should. In Westeros, vulnerability is a liability. Kings are not raised to admit doubt. Warriors are not trained to say they regret what their strength has done. If Maekar were to openly apologize for the past, it would not only weaken him politically, it would unravel the identity he has built to survive. So instead, he communicates the only way he knows how, through restraint. The shoulder touch is not dramatic. It's not theatrical, but it carries years of guilt inside it. There's a subtle hesitation before he pulls Egg closer, almost as if he's unsure whether he deserves to. And when he finally hugs him, it feels unfamiliar. Not because he doesn't love his son, but because he doesn't know how to show it without armor. This is a warrior king trying to express something softer than steel. For Egg, that hug interrupts something dangerous. He came into that room ready to act out of fury, ready to prove that he is not weak, ready to separate himself from the family by doing something decisive. But instead of punishment, he is met with understanding. And that's disarming, because anger expects resistance. It prepares for conflict. It knows how to fight against shouting and threats. What it doesn't know how to process is quiet empathy. In that embrace, Egg feels something he didn't expect, not control, not discipline, but shared pain. Maekar isn't hugging him to stop him from ruining the family's reputation. He's hugging him because he recognizes the breaking point. He sees the same spiral that once consumed him. And maybe, just maybe, this is his way of saying, "Don't become me." There's something deeply human about that. We often imagine kings as distant figures carved from stone. But in this moment, Maekar looks less like a ruler and more like a father who has already failed once and refuses to fail again. His silence is not emptiness. It's crowded. Crowded with regret. With memories. With words he cannot afford to say. And Egg, who has been dreaming of escape, suddenly sees that his father is not the cold symbol of authority he thought he was. He's a man carrying invisible wounds. That realization doesn't solve everything. It doesn't erase Aerian's cruelty. It doesn't fix the fractures in their house. But it reframes the anger. Because for the first time, Egg understands that the violence in his family did not begin with him, and it does not have to continue through him. The hug becomes a turning point not because it is dramatic, but because it is restrained. In a world where men prove themselves through force, Maekar chooses stillness. And that stillness speaks louder than any speech ever could. And what makes this moment even more powerful is what Maekar does not do. He doesn't justify Baelor's death. He doesn't defend Aerian. He doesn't lecture Egg about loyalty or bloodline. He simply holds him. That restraint is everything. In Westeros, power is loud. Kings announce decrees. Lords issue threats. Even love is often transactional. Alliances, marriages, heirs. But here, the most important communication between a father and son happens without a single command. Maekar understands something that most men in this world learn too late. Once violence feels righteous, it becomes easy. The first act is the hardest. The second comes quicker. After that, it becomes identity. He has already crossed that line once. And now he sees his son standing at its edge. This is not just about stopping Egg from killing Aerian. It's about stopping a cycle where anger becomes inheritance, where sons repeat the sins of fathers because no one ever admits the damage. Maekar cannot say, "I regret what happened with Baelor." He cannot openly confess that the memory wakes him at night. He cannot admit that being strong cost him something permanent. But his body language does. There's a heaviness in the way he leans into the embrace. Not dominance, not control. Weight. As if the armor he wears in court has finally slipped for a second, as if the king has stepped aside and only the brother, and the father, remains. And Egg feels it. For someone who wants to leave his family, who feels suffocated by its legacy, this is confusing. Because anger is easier when the other person is a villain. It's easier to walk away when you believe the people behind you are heartless. But what do you do when you realize they are hurting too? That realization doesn't excuse anything. It doesn't erase Aerian's cruelty, but it complicates the narrative in Egg's mind. Suddenly, his father isn't just the enforcer of a broken system. He's a man trapped inside it. That's where the psychology of this scene becomes quietly devastating. Maekar represents a generation of men taught that love must be hidden to remain respected. Vulnerability, especially in a ruler, invites challenge. If he openly weeps for Baelor, rivals will whisper weakness. If he openly apologizes, enemies will smell doubt. So he compresses everything inside. And compression creates pressure. You can see it in his stillness. It's the stillness of someone constantly holding something back. The hug isn't just comfort, it's release. A small crack in a wall built over years. We've seen this before in the larger world of Game of Thrones. Think about Tywin Lannister, a man who rarely raises his voice. His anger is often expressed through silence, a long stare, a quiet dismissal, a refusal to acknowledge emotion. When Tyrion demands recognition, Tywin doesn't explode. He withholds. His silence becomes a weapon. Or consider Jaime Lannister after losing his hand. There are moments where he says very little, but the frustration is visible, in the way he looks at his sword, in the way he avoids eye contact, in the way shame replaces arrogance. The absence of words tells you more than any speech could. In this world, silence is rarely empty. It is loaded. Maekar's silence, however, is not weaponized like Tywin's. It's protective. It shields Egg from a mistake. It shields himself from breaking apart completely. And maybe, in a strange way, it shields Baelor's memory from being reduced to a political conversation. What's heartbreaking is that this may be the only way Maekar knows how to apologize. Not with kneeling, not with tears, but with prevention. By stopping Egg, he is trying to undo what he once did. He cannot bring Baelor back, but he can stop another brother from falling by a family member's hand. That's the quiet redemption inside the scene. Egg doesn't respond with dramatic forgiveness. He doesn't collapse into tears, but something shifts in him. The rage that felt sharp begins to dull, not because it disappears, but because it is shared. And shared pain is different from isolated anger. For the first time, Egg sees that his father's strength is not the absence of regret. It is the burden of it. Maekar continues to rule, to command, to stand tall, all while carrying something deeply personal that he never speaks about. That realization plants a seed. Maybe leaving is still necessary. Maybe distance is the only way for Egg to become his own person. But now, that decision isn't fueled purely by resentment. It carries understanding. And that understanding is born entirely from a silent embrace. This is why the scene lingers. There are no grand speeches about destiny, no dramatic confessions, just two figures standing in a dim room, bound by blood and by mistakes. A father who once let rage decide for him, a son about to do the same. One chooses to hold instead of strike. In a story filled with wars, betrayals, and roaring dragons, this moment feels almost small, but emotionally, it's enormous, because it suggests something rare in Westeros, that strength might not be proven by dominance, but by restraint. Maekar doesn't undo the past. He doesn't repair his family in a single gesture, but for 1 second, he breaks the pattern, and in doing so, he says everything he cannot afford to speak aloud. If you enjoy quiet character moments like this, where silence says more than swords ever could, consider subscribing. There are many more scenes in this world that deserve to be understood a little deeper.